So in this segment, I wanted to discuss Starmer and Labour really getting tied up under their definition of working people, and I guess we'll talk about my definition of it. And I don't know how Labour are getting so tied up in this. It seems like every time they come out with certain policies, or each time they come out with certain policies and certain definitions, the media ask them about it, and they're just like, actually, I don't know about that. And you just like, how do you fail under the most basic questions? Like, how do you struggle like this? I don't get it. So we'll look at this little interview here with I think this is Beth Rigby of Sky News. It's just shocking.
Living usually paid in a sort of monthly check. But I think that's obviously very broad. So let me be clear. What I mean...
Let's go over that again.
Prime Minister, are you a working person?
Well, I would define a working person as somebody goes out and earns their living, usually paid in a sort of monthly check. But I think that's obviously very broad. So let me be clear. What I mean, or if you like, who I have in my mind's eye when I make decisions as Prime Minister, are the sorts of working people who go out, work hard, and maybe save a bit of money, but don't have the wherewithal to write a cheque to get out of difficulties if they and their family get into difficulties. Now,
but again, that's very broad as well, because say, for example, you have a really big problem with your house, for example. Even if you earn good money, 50, 60k, you might not be in a situation where you can just write off certain damage to your house or your car, for example. Like, its definition doesn't really make sense.
Now that's who I have in my mind. People who've got that anxiety, if you like, in the bottom of their stomach that says, we're doing all right, but should something happen to me and my family, I haven't actually got the wherewithal to get out of that problem.
So it's kind of discussing people who don't really have much in terms of savings. But again, like, he's being so vague with the kind of amounts and things like that. I think it's just so he doesn't isolate certain people, but it just doesn't really make sense, the stuff he's saying.
The definition is very broad. Who isn't a working person? Who is a person for whom you think taxes should go up?
Well, it is broad, I accept that. But when
sound engineer here did a really poor job for volume controls.
No, but when I tell you who's in my mind's eye, which is, and I think everybody watching this will know whether they're in this category, because you carry in that situation a sort of knot in the bottom of the stomach, which is, if push comes to shove and something happens to me and my family, I can't just get a checkbook out, even though I've maybe got a bit of saving.
Okay.
But again, that's a lot of people, man. That's a lot of people who can't just write off, their car being totaled or whatever. It also depends, like, how large is your family? What kind of financial implications are we talking here? This could apply to a lot more people than you would think, in a lot more wage brackets than you would think as well. Like, when you look at the situation with the interest rate increases, there are a lot of people who probably had enough money that could have easily saved money each month because their mortgage was, their mortgage repayments were very low. But as soon as the rates spiked, they would be immediately within this definition of it. It doesn't really make sense. What he should be talking about really is earned income versus unearned income, as in what money you go out to work for versus dividends, stocks, shares, that kind of stuff. And I don't know why they just couldn't phrase it better. It's just crazy to me.
Okay, so for someone who works but gets their income from assets as well, such as shares of property, are they a working person?
Well, they wouldn't come within my definition,
so
but
their taxes could go
yeah, I mean, you can probably give me any number of examples. And don't know your.
This is what he should have just started with. And Labour did backtrack on this definition. They kind of went off to discuss if the majority of your income comes from working, then that's you're classed as a working person, even if you have some money in stocks and shares, that kind of stuff, where like you will face additional taxes on your stocks, for example, or dividends or whatever, but you won't face that on your income. That's kind of it wouldn't be that hard to phrase it like this. I just don't understand why they couldn't have figured this out from the start. You pay these goons enough money for them to figure things out.
Tagging a second question to the first, which is you're asking me for a definition of who's a working person, and then you're making assumptions about what the tax might be in relation to.
We're running out of time, but I could.
So he's fighting back against the framing here, which is always nice to see.
Go through
you could, or you could.
You're a working person, and you might put fuel
you could go through that exercise, or
that is true. They are ending allegedly they are ending the fuel duty increase, which again that is a tax on working people, especially the ones that, because they keep talking about people who go out to work. They're the ones who are going to be impacted most by the fuel duty charge. People who don't work from home and don't use public transport to get to work.
Or you could, ensure that people hear from me who I have in my mind's eye. People watching this will know.
You use that phrase a lot, mind's eye there. It's very strange.
Whether they're in that group or not. Those people who...
I don't think there are. I think there are a lot of people who, there was that famous incident on Question Time where they talked about raising taxes on the top, 5% of earners. And the guy's like, oh, I'm not in the top 5% of earners. And I think someone asked him how much he earned. He's like 75k. And then it turns out he was in the top 5% of earners. So, I don't think people do actually know where the definitions are of, even this definition of working people or, working class people, middle class people and things like that. Those definitions are very vague. So I don't think people actually really know where they fall on that kind of income spectrum. This one is personally my favourite one. Every time I see this geezer, I know the video is going to be a banger because he has no idea what he's talking about.
You promised not to put taxes up on working people. Who are working people?
Well, as the Chancellor has said, working people are people who go out to work for their income. And we were very clear in the election.
Do landlords work?
Well, we were very clear in the election in terms of our manifesto promises that we wanted to protect...
It's like he's reading off a script. I love this guy.
...working people. And by
that,
we meant...
Do landlords work?
Well, we're talking about where people get their income from, and our priority in the manifesto, and it's a manifesto commitment that we're keeping, is to make sure that we protect working people in terms of not raising any of the rates of income tax, national insurance, VAT.
So those are the taxes, or VAT aside, income tax and national insurance, these are the taxes you typically pay if you're an employee. So they're the ones that the majority of people will end up paying.
Making sure that that promise is kept to protect working people in what is otherwise
Do landlords work?
It's going to be a difficult
Mr. Murray.
budget. We're talking
It's
about
a very simple answer, which is no, they don't work. They make money off an asset. That's why they pay capital gains tax, not income tax.
Where people get their income from. And
well,
working people...
I'm talking about a simple question. Do landlords work? I think I've asked you 5 times now. Do they work?
We're talking about where people get their income from.
He's just reading a script off, one of those. That's all he's doing. Like, he's looking at his notes, going like this. The guy who wrote his notes, going,
"Oh, word for word, bar for bar." Oh.
Honestly, that's all he's doing. He's reading off a script, word for word, bar for bar. When asked a direct question, he can't answer it. And Bridget, Laura Kuenssberg asking Bridget Phillipson about this.
What we set out in our manifesto was that we would not increase VAT, national insurance or income tax on working people, and coming out of this budget, working people will not see higher taxes in the pay slips that they receive. That is really important because we know the pressures that people are under.
Kind of mad, when you think about it. People on the top band, the 45 pence tax rate, they would fall under this definition potentially of working people, or at least Labour's broader definition of working people. Even though Starmer was talking about working people being people who couldn't just afford to just pull out a checkbook and clear whatever issues they're facing, which again I think is a dumb definition. But yeah, it's just it's a bit too. They picked out a term that was just too broad. I think that's one of their major problems. But they did this because their stupid manifesto. They boxed themselves in tremendously.
On other measures in the budget, other tax measures, you'll have to wait to ask directly Rachel Rees when she is here. And I can't you'll appreciate, the Sunday ahead of the budget, I can't speculate on precise tax measures.
This isn't speculating. I'm asking a question of principle. Why are people who run businesses not working people under the Chancellor's own definition?
Because our manifesto is all about VAT, national insurance and income tax on people whose main source of income is the income that they earn from going out to work.
Well, that's not really what your manifesto said, actually. Your manifesto said repeatedly, in fact, here's a quote here from Rachel Rees. You've read it. It says in black and white, we won't increase national insurance, income tax and VAT. So I'll ask you again.
That's literally what Bridget Phillipson said. So let's go back quickly.
Because our manifesto is all about VAT, national insurance and income tax on people whose main source of income is the income that they earn from going out to work.
Well, that's not really...
Which, again, if you're a person who makes money through, stocks and shares, you're paying capital gains, not income tax.
What your manifesto said, actually. Your manifesto said repeatedly, in fact, here's a quote here from Rachel Rees. You've read it. It says in black and white, we won't increase national insurance, income tax and VAT. So I'll ask you again, why are people who run businesses not working people in this government's eyes?
Because they're making money off an asset, which is their business. Like, what? Like, I guess, maybe you can argue it's not an asset, however you want to define it, but they're not working like they're not classed as what, you know. I guess it's different if you're a small business owner and you work as well as make money through, you know, dividends that your, you know, the profits your company makes, but then at the same time, like the income you make as a wage is not going up, but the income you make from a dividend potentially is going up. Like Laura Kuenssberg, with probably the most pathetic bit of journalism I've ever seen. Like her team is abysmal. Whoever is helping her prep is awful, and she herself is just a complete fraud.
As I say, our manifesto was very clear about who we were talking about and what we meant. Wider measures, other spending and taxation measures within the budget. You'll appreciate the Chancellor will set all of those out, and it's more than my job is worth to come on your programme and announce ahead of time what might or might not be in a budget.
But I'm not, Secretary of State, asking you about the decisions on Wednesday. I'm asking you what you mean as a government, what you meant in your manifesto by working people. The definition of this is incredibly important because you're using it as the foundation for how you make decisions about people's pay slips, people's income. So how do you define a working person?
Well, you are inviting me to speculate by the nature of the question that you're asking.
I mean, she is and she isn't, because you said taxes aren't going to go up on people who you class as a working person. So you've invited speculation by not defining what you mean properly. That's where the problem comes in, because you use terms you don't define properly.
What I'm saying is that after the budget, when people look at their pay slips, they will not see higher taxes. I think that's a very clear commitment.
Because, you know, dividends aren't on your pay slip. They're not on your pay slip at all. So she probably answered it the best. She did have more time. I did see this analysis from this journalist here. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. We'll go with Ria, who works for Bloomberg, and she was saying politics would be more honest if Labour had just said the country couldn't afford the national insurance cuts under Truss Sunak, opposed them and reversed them in office. Instead, we have a silly dance over definitions of a working person and cuts on the employer side of national insurance, which amounts to the same thing in terms of impact on wages, which I think that one's been debated in terms of raising the income tax and raising the national insurance contributions of employers. But, you know, she's more of an expert in this area than I am, so I'll cede that ground. You know, she says Labour was so scared to be attacked on tax in the election that they didn't have the confidence to call out those national insurance cuts as unaffordable. Now they are boxed in and looking very slippery, which is true. This is some of the best analysis I've seen. They boxed themselves in from the manifesto. That was their big problem. You know, she absolutely cooked them there. You got this, you know, number 10 roused back Starmer's comments on owners of shares not being working people. Spokesperson says the government still considers a person who holds a small amount of savings in stocks and shares a working person, despite the Prime Minister's comments in Samoa. So they've pulled back his initial statement. And like, again, these people, like, I don't get why they couldn't come up with working definitions of what they're going to use before they go out in the media. Like, surely Mr. Morgan McSweeney, the magic man, would figure some of this out, no? Or whoever's doing that, you know, the political advising would figure this out, no? Like, honestly, some of the biggest frauds ever, you know, absolutely stealing a living. You got more Beth Rigby stuff really trying to go after Starmer over this definition here, which is crazy to me. Like, her versus Laura Kuenssberg is madness. I think Kuenssberg will have a beat, but
Prime Minister, there has been somewhat of a backlash back in the UK after you told me that people who also make an income from property of share...
I don't think there's been that much of a backlash, apart from right-wing media and some people on Twitter who are predominantly landlords. I don't think the backlash has been that bad.
Do not fit into your definition of working people. Are you, as some of your critics argue, plotting a war against Middle Britain?
No. Let me be clear about that. What we're doing is two things in the budget. The first is...
Which, again, a war against Middle Britain, like, if you're a person who's middle class in Britain and you make your money through income, or predominantly through income, this is not really going to affect you by the looks of it. So again, like, unless you make your money through assets, then yeah, I'd be concerned. If you're not, then I wouldn't be so concerned. I could be wrong. I might take an L on it, but, you know, the framing here from Rigby is just abysmal, honestly.
Fixing the foundations, which is dealing with the inheritance that we've got, including the £22 billion black hole. We have to deal with that. In the past, for the last 14 years, leaders have walked past those problems, created fictions, and I'm not prepared to do that. We're going to fix the foundations. And having fixed the foundations, we're going to rebuild our country. And that is a very clear plan to ensure that people are better off, their living standards go up wherever they live across the United Kingdom.
Which again, I think he's looking a lot stronger here after kind of probably figuring out what to actually say. But the whole problem is they come up with these definitions they just can't really answer. This person here tweeting out, which is really the answer. A working person is someone who relies on their income from working, not through savings and wealth. Why is that so difficult to understand? What am I missing? And someone asking about retired pensioners and things like that. Are they classed as working people? I wouldn't say so. They're retired. And, how do these non-working people get their money to save to buy stocks and shares? Like, if you're a person who worked really hard and you bought shares and whatever in like Apple and you sold them off, right? Yeah, you were a working person and you no longer rely on work to live. You're no longer a working person. Like, it's not hard, guys. Honestly, some of the people on Twitter, you think you're going through NASA physics or something. This person here, an FPPE pro EU person, showing that not all pro EU people are so progressive. Saying, as a landlord, you say I'm not a working person. To purchase the properties, I work day and night in the city to pay for them. Now I work day and night to maintain them and keep the tenants happy. Unless you're talking about 30 odd properties, yeah, why are you working day and night to maintain them? It's a house. They don't require that much work unless you're getting in really bad tenants. Which again, that would be a failing on you. So I don't get why this person's so upset about this. And there's some phone calls about it. Like, as I say, he's trying to define working people as working class when he's really not. He's defining people who predominantly rely on PAYE, I think it is, which is the income tax system we use in the UK.
Why don't you just say the words we all understand? Working class, eh? Why?
Because he's talking about people who are on the higher two bands of tax, as well, which those people are not, really working class. If you're paying the 45p tax rate, you're not working class.
Why is he so allergic to using the phrase that we would all understand? Or maybe we wouldn't. Trouble began, as it often does for Starmer, with the right-wing press, I guess, frothing at the mouth, desperate for everything he does to fail. The Labour manifesto mentions working people no fewer than 21 times. The manifesto, of course, also promised not to raise taxes on working people. So it didn't take long for those, well, particularly those with more than a few quid on notice, to start asking, well, am I a working person? I mean, I work. I worked hard. I didn't inherit all my wealth. How dare these communists think of putting up my taxes? Certain sections of the media, rightly in my opinion, have been pressing the Prime Minister to explain exactly what he means by working people.
Which I don't think there's much wrong with pressing the Prime Minister on a definition that they're using. I've no issue with Laura Kuenssberg saying you're using this as a foundational argument. Maybe, Laura, you should have done your job during the election and quiz Labour on it because it was in their manifesto. I don't know, I'm not a journalist, so,
Nick was doing months ago. The questioning this week, though, reached Motorhead levels of volume, so much so that Starmer was forced to offer up yet another explanation while at the Commonwealth gathering in Samoa. Sir Keir said a working person is somebody who goes out and earns their living, usually paid under sort of monthly cheque, but they didn't have the ability to write a cheque to get out of difficulties.
Which, again, it's just not, it's very vague.
If people who drew an income from property or shares were working people, Starmer said they wouldn't fall within his definition. Downing Street immediately issued a clarification of the boss's clarification. The PM didn't mean people who had only a few shares weren't working people. Of course they are. Does that sound right to you?
It's just, like, a double clarification's pretty embarrassing. This person here's got it spot on, though. A lot of people are not working class, e.g. barristers, corporate directors, merchant bankers, hospital consultants, etc. The distinction is clear, though, as is the distinction between working people and those who inherit their wealth or live off rent, interest paid, or, again, assets. So again, I just don't see why Labour are struggling with this so much. It's hilarious. This guy saying Starmer is the most underrated politician in this country. Even now, sat in number 10, he's not perfect. He's going to do Labour things, like not build more social housing. Like what? I don't get the thing people are trying to say here. You got a situation where you've got people, millionaires in this country telling the government to tax them more, and you have, really the Labour Party refusing to do that. Unless you predominantly make your income through stocks and shares. Okay, I don't get why they're not doing more, but whatever. But don't worry, guys. Labour are going to announce 5 new free ports in the budget. So, that's great news, isn't it? The Labour Party investing in these free ports which do nothing for the economy but make it worse. You know, David Henning saying there's no serious evidence that free ports can support UK economic growth. Looks like someone in the Treasury desperate for an announcement. Bad sign for a new government. You know, and as you were then, no new free ports, just improvements. So 5 new improvements, like it makes zero sense what they're saying here. I just don't get it. You know, free ports are a complete disaster. You know, again, there's just more kind of upset. You know, Kelvin Mackenzie, who is the who's the one of the editors of The Sun, you know, talking about now Yaf Starmer's made it clear in media interview that if you make your money through owning shares or as a landlord for dividends, you are not a working person, which 100% is true. And, you know, NJ pointing out landlords are literally the most idle people in Britain, you know, living off other people's money. And you got this person saying, you know, I sacrificed so much in my 20s in order to buy a rental property. And then NJ pointing out, you know, if you break even, then someone else is literally paying your mortgage for free. Imagine complaining about getting someone else's pay for your second home. Landlords just want to be given everything for free, which, you know, I agree with what she's saying there. And, you know, landlords trying to tell Starmer they're working people, like, get out of it, honestly, in the bin. And, you know, the BBC are actually coming through with the most ridiculous stories. So this one here, holiday home dream left us crippled with debt. So these people, right, these two here, they invested £110,000 in a caravan in Lincolnshire, right? They used, you know, money that they inherited. So, you know, again, money from inheritance, but okay. So they didn't exactly work hard for it. You know, they put down 25k deposit, turned it into a financial agreement to pay off the rest. So they wanted their relatives to use this caravan for free and rent it out to the public to offset their costs. So their investment that they wanted to use to benefit their family, right, so they could have free holidays, which is somewhat noble, but again, it's an asset at the end of the day. You know, like, if I said I want to buy a car, you know, that I'm just going to rent out to people, no one's going to feel upset for me if something goes wrong. So I don't understand why they're so, you know, why they're so mad about it. It beggars belief that, you know, the BBC are putting up this story about these two crying about their investment not paying off. It's just crazy to me. You know, there's more stuff around the winter fuel allowance. We're kind of switching towards more stories around the budget here. Again, this reporter, Rhea, I hope that's how you pronounce her name, you know, who works for Bloomberg, talking about how there's nothing in the budget that's going to soften the blow of losing the winter fuel allowance payment from Labour, which again, that will impact, you know, people who are, you know, pensioners who would be classed kind of working class, I guess, who aren't on the highest income. But, you know, that's not too much of a surprise. You know, O'Brien really you know, I tell you what James O'Brien does best, because he's got that condescending tone sometimes. He's great at dunking on people, and he dunks on this lady who's a landlord.
I'm working and I've let out a property, but on the other hand, the part that I'd also
what's
like
easier?
to say
What's easier, the money that you work for or the money that you get off your tenant?
They're both just as hard.
No, they're not.
Sama,
people are listening. Sama, people are listening. I suppose it depends what you do for a living. You might be a radio presenter, in which case it is a piece of cake. But you know and I know.
You know where I am at the moment?
The money you get off your tenants is much, much easier than the money you get off your boss.
It isn't, because I am in my rented property right this minute, cleaning up after my tenant. I
bet you it takes about an hour or two to clean up. Like, it's not that hard. You know, as long as they didn't leave it as like a bomb site or something, a couple of hours at most. Whereas most people are working, you know, 9 to 5 or whatever, which is way more difficult than cleaning up a house for a bit.
It's really had problems every single month. Oh, the cooker's gone. Can you buy me a new one? Oh, this is not done.
Oh, that's hard work, isn't it? So what did you do? Hang on. Let me just do this. Hang on.
This is S-tier trolling. I can't lie, though. I respect it.
Wait,
I've spent my hard-earned cash.
I'm just going on Amazon. I'm just going, yeah, but they pay for a cooker. I
paid for a cooker.
No, they pay rent in order to be able to live in a place that has a cooker in it.
Because the house has to be habitable. That's like a landlord taking credit because the water's running. It's madness.
Hang on. Sorry, you're distracting me.
You're saying I'm earning a lot.
I just bought a cooker. I just bought a cooker on Amazon. It'll be delivered at 1 o'clock today. How much do I invoice you for?
No. See, that
was really easy.
You're literally just employing. You're getting a builder in to install the cooker, and you're ordering a cooker. That's not hard.
It's a profit. And
I'm not classing it as profit. I'm saying your job is to provide. If you are insisting on calling it a job, part of your job is to provide them with a cooker. You can't start complaining about it if they're paying rent.
Look at it also from the other side.
No, because I need you to admit.
It's just wild. Like, people think this is such a hard job. Like, it's an investment.
If you say, is that landlord a worker? The answer is yes and no. Which is why...
The answer is no.
I think.
Oh, he's talking about the lady. Sorry, that's my bad. She again, like the income she earns from her job is not going to be changing. It's the income she earns from being a landlord. That's what's changing.
That's why perhaps politicians can't answer it.
I mean, no, I've literally just answered it for you.
Yes and no. Yes, you are a worker, but no, the landlording bit of your...
It's because they use this dumb definition. If they just explained it as, if you make money through investments, you will be impacted. If you make money through PAYE, you won't be impacted. Rather than coming up with this, this phrase that they want to use and trying to define it as something specific, which doesn't make sense in the context of what's going on here. I'm just shocked at these guys. And this geezer here, this might be the most embarrassing of them all. He's talking about, Starmer saying this is the same guy who couldn't define what a woman is. Now he can't define what a working person is. Ali Miraj, he makes Nick Ferrari look intelligent. That's all I'm going to say on that. I saw this article in The Guardian from Rachel Reeves talking about my budget will match greatest economic moments in Labour history. Now, I'm going to make a wild statement and say it's not going to touch any of Attlee's achievements. Clement Attlee got the NHS off the ground, massive social housing projects, amongst other things, right? So unless she's going to really revamp the NHS with this budget and also, get massive housing projects on the way, you keep Clement Attlee's name out your mouth, mate, honestly. In an interview with The Observer before the first budget by a female chancellor, Reeves draws comparisons with Labour's historic reform programmes begun by Clement Attlee begun in 1945, in 1964 under Harold Wilson, and 97 under Tony Blair. But the difference is, Attlee didn't just do historic reform program. He didn't just reform the system. He made it fundamentally better for people by building so much social housing. Labour, kind of ruled out investment in social housing. So again, don't compare yourself to Clement Attlee. You might be Tony Blair at best. She says this is only the fourth time that Labour has gone from opposition to government. In 1945, we rebuilt after the war. In 64, we rebuilt after the white heat of technology. And in 97, we rebuilt our public services. We need to do all of that now. Reeves will, however, face huge controversy amid claims that she will break at least the spirit of Labour's election promise when she announced £40 billion worth of tax rises and spending cuts that will include an increase of 2% in employers' national insurance contributions. And let's not forget, Clement Attlee, these governments here, right? I speak to Tony Blair specifically. They invested a lot in things like education, right, and other kind of public services and in budgets. There's no comparison made here because you've got someone in Rachel Reeves who's looking at making cuts to certain departments, making cuts to the Ministry of Justice, for example. I don't remember Tony Blair really doing that. I could be wrong, but I'm not seeing where this comparison's coming in from. They might as well just compare themselves to Thatcher more than anything, but maybe that's a bit unfair. At best we would see something closer to Tony Blair than we'll see to Clement Attlee. There is some good stuff in here. 1.4 billion will be directed towards rebuilding crumbling schools, with 50 schools rebuilt a year. Hospital rebuilding projects are expected to be announced. These are great. These will provide jobs for people. But more importantly, the longer you leave these things, the worse they become. So I respect this a lot. Reeves says such schemes would not be possible without changing the fiscal rules, which again, even though she talked about she's not going to tweak the fiscal rules a couple of years ago, and now she's going to tweak the fiscal rules. But okay, whatever. I support this change. It's just dumb that they couldn't just say this from the jump, but whatever, elections, something you need to win, all that kind of stuff. So I support the change to the fiscal rules. I support, this kind of stuff going on here. The bond markets have been a bit iffy on the rule changes, I think. But I support, rebuilding schools and things like that. It was just dumb the way they set out the fiscal rule in the first place. That's one of the major problems I had. But overall, is this gonna compete with what Attlee did or with what Tony Blair did? I don't know. I'm not too familiar with Harold Wilson's game, so I'll have to apologise. Will she be able to compete with that? I don't know. But, talking about Attlee, I don't think that's you, Chief, I'll be honest. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.